During the 1960s, rock stopped being just rebellious music and became a mental laboratory. Join us as we explore the 15 rock songs written under the influence of LSD, and how these lysergic experiences changed the history of music forever. In an era marked by wars, social change, and a generation of young people who questioned everything, LSD emerged as a gateway to new forms of perception. For many musicians, it was not just a drug, but a creative tool that altered the way music was composed, felt, and listened to. Songs that seemed to come from another planet began to dominate radio airwaves and live stages. The Beatles, Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. When the Beatles fully entered their psychedelic era, their music left behind every previous boundary. Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds emerged at a time when LSD had already become part of the band's creative environment. John Lennon began writing images with no apparent logic, as if he were describing a mental landscape rather than a real story. The song was built from sensations, colors, and impossible figures that reflected altered states of consciousness. During the sessions, the band experimented with unconventional structures, avoiding traditional pop storytelling. LSD allowed Lennon to disconnect from everyday reality and write from a more abstract plane. Each line feels like a snapshot from an internal journey, where time and space no longer make sense. There is no clear beginning or ending, only a stream of visions. The production also played a crucial role in reinforcing the lysergic atmosphere. Shifts in rhythm, studio effects, and floating harmonies were designed to create an immersive sensation. This wasn't music meant for dancing, but for closing your eyes and drifting away. The listener became part of the trip. With this song, the Beatles proved that rock could be a complete sensory experience. LSD didn't just influence the lyrics, but the entire artistic conception of the track. Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds marked a turning point in popular music, opening the doors of psychedelia for good. Jimi Hendrix, Purple Haze. Purple Haze sounds unlike any conventional song because it was born from an unconventional experience. Hendrix openly explained that the song emerged from confusing sensations and visions brought on by psychedelic experiences. The lyrics speak of not knowing what's happening, of losing control, of being trapped inside a mental fog. It's almost a literal description of an intense LSD trip. Unlike other songwriters, Hendrix wasn't trying to explain the experience, but to transmit it. Each verse is loaded with ambiguity and disorientation.
Put a spell on me.
There's no linear story, only fragments of thoughts appearing and vanishing. This reflected how LSD distorted his perception of time and reality. Musically, the guitar becomes the true narrator of the journey. Distortion, feedback, and aggressive riffs create constant tension. The sound feels like it's folding in on itself, as if it were breathing. The song doesn't seek comfort. It seeks sensory impact. Purple Haze cemented Hendrix as the ultimate figure of psychedelic rock. LSD didn't just expand his imagination, it redefined how the electric guitar could be used. This song isn't just heard, it's experienced. Pink Floyd, Interstellar Overdrive. Interstellar Overdrive was born in the early days of Pink Floyd, when Syd Barrett led the band under the heavy influence of LSD. It's not a traditional song, but a sonic exploration. It was conceived as a space journey, both literal and mental, reflecting deep psychedelic experiences. The structure is chaotic and free, with no fixed direction. This perfectly mirrors the sensation of a lysergic trip, where the mind jumps from one idea to another without warning. Barrett used LSD to break creative barriers and let the music flow without restrictions. During live performances, the song stretched for long minutes, turning into a collective improvisation. The audience wasn't listening to a song, they were participating in an experience. Each instrument seemed to float in its own universe. Interstellar Overdrive represents the moment when rock stopped looking at the ground and started exploring the cosmos. LSD was the creative fuel that allowed Pink Floyd to build entirely new sonic landscapes. Donovan, Sunshine Superman. Donovan was one of the artists who embraced psychedelia from a more spiritual perspective. Sunshine Superman was written under the influence of LSD, but also shaped by mysticism and Eastern philosophy. The song reflects an expanded perception of love and consciousness. LSD allowed Donovan to write from a place of deep introspection. The lyrics combine sensory images with almost mystical references. There's no urgency or aggression, only a floating calm. This is the brightest side of the acid trip. The production uses soft, repetitive sounds that reinforce the trance-like mood. Everything is designed to gently envelop the listener. It's not a chaotic journey, but a contemplative LSD here acts as a lens to see the world with greater emotional clarity. Sunshine Superman proved that psychedelia didn't have to be dark. It could also be warm, romantic, and expansive. A clear example of how LSD influenced multiple dimensions of rock. Mingus, Solo Dancer. Although Charles Mingus wasn't a typical rock figure, Solo Dancer was reinterpreted and absorbed into the psychedelic context. The piece reflects deep mental exploration, where improvisation becomes a mirror of the subconscious. LSD influenced the way musicians perceived time and space within the composition. Musical lines don't follow traditional patterns, but emotional impulses. Each section seems to emerge from a different mental state. The sense of disorientation is central to the piece. There's no clear structure guiding the listener. This perfectly replicates the lysergic experience, where everything flows without apparent control. Solo Dancer shows how psychedelia transcended genres. LSD didn't just affect rock, but experimental music as a whole during that era. Cream, Sunshine of Your Love. Sunshine of Your Love was born at a time when Cream was exploring new sonic dimensions driven by psychedelic experiences. Eric Clapton and Jack Bruce were deeply influenced by LSD, which altered how they felt rhythm and repetition. The song was built around a hypnotic, almost obsessive riff that reflects how the mind locks onto a single idea during a lysergic trip. LSD allowed the band to simplify structures without losing intensity. Instead of multiple changes, the song rotates around itself like a mantra. That constant repetition creates a trance-like sensation, very common in psychedelic experiences. The lyrics rely on raw emotion rather than complex storytelling. Clapton's guitar tone sounds thick and almost liquid, as if melting with every note. That sound wasn't accidental, but the result of experimenting while perception was altered. Bass and drums act like a constant, almost tribal pulse.
I'll stay with you, darling, now.
Sunshine of Your Love proved that psychedelia could also be heavy and grounded. Not everything was bright colors and cosmic flights. Sometimes LSD pushed artists inward, towards something primal. 13th floor elevators. Slip inside this house. Two bands were as directly linked to LSD as the 13th floor elevators. For them, acid wasn't just an influence, it was a philosophy. Slip Inside This House was conceived as an explicit invitation to expand the mind. Even the title speaks about entering another level of consciousness. The lyrics are loaded with references to spiritual awakening and altered perception. Roky Erickson wrote under the influence of LSD with the intention of breaking the listener's mental barriers. The song functions almost like a psychedelic manifesto. Musically, the electric jug creates a vibrating, disorienting sound. That texture perfectly mirrors the sensation of an intense acid trip. Everything feels slightly off, like reality itself is misaligned. Slip Inside This House represents the purest core of psychedelia. Here, LSD isn't hidden or symbolic, it's openly celebrated as the creative force behind the music. The Doors, The End.
My only friend,
The End began as a simple song but transformed radically under the influence of LSD. Jim Morrison used acid as a tool to explore his subconscious.
no safety or...
In altered states, the song grew darker, longer, and deeply symbolic. Each performance became a ritual. The lyrics reflect fragmented thoughts, visions, and internal conflicts. LSD allowed Morrison to speak without filters. The song doesn't follow a clear narrative, but a sequence of disturbing images. The music supports the psychological journey with a slow, hypnotic progression. There's no rush, only inevitability. The listener becomes trapped in a dense, ceremonial atmosphere. The End shows how LSD pushed rock into extreme emotional territories. This isn't entertainment, it's confrontation. A mind exploring itself without limits. The Velvet Underground, Venus in Furs. Venus in Furs feels like it emerged from an altered mental state. Lou Reed and John Cale were immersed in psychedelic experimentation when they composed it. LSD influenced how they approached taboo themes and oppressive atmospheres. The constant repetition creates a hypnotic and unsettling sensation. This circular perception of time is common in lysergic experiences. Psychedelia here is uncomfortable, not colorful.
chase the costumes.
Drones and sustained sounds reinforce immersion. There's no escape, only descent. Every element disturbs and fascinates at the same time. Venus in Furs proves LSD doesn't always lead to light. Sometimes it opens doors to darker corners of the mind. Iron Butterfly, In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida. In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida is practically synonymous with psychedelic rock. The song was born during extended LSD-influenced sessions. Its long, repetitive structure reflects the distorted perception of time during an acid trip. The lyrics are minimal and secondary to the sonic experience. That was intentional. LSD pushed the band to prioritize sensation over message. This isn't a song you listen to, it's a song you pass through. Extended solos and hypnotic drums create a ritualistic atmosphere. The repetition doesn't bore, it deepens. The listener enters a meditative state. In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida proved that rock could completely break away from radio formats. LSD gave the band the courage to go that far. The Byrds, 8 Miles High. 8 Miles High emerged after psychedelic experiences reshaped the band's creative perception. Although it speaks of flying, the real journey is mental. LSD influenced the sense of detachment and expansion present in the lyrics. Roger McGuinn's guitar draws from jazz and Indian music scales. These choices reflect an open mind shaped by altered consciousness. The song avoids traditional folk rock structures. The lyrics convey isolation and distant observation. It's the feeling of hovering above the world. LSD intensified that perception and turned it into song. 8 Miles High helped bring psychedelia into the mainstream and marked a new chapter for American rock. Pink Floyd, Astronomy Domini. Astronomy Domini is a direct window into Syd Barrett's psychedelic mind. LSD deeply influenced his fascination with space and the unknown. The song feels like a cosmic journey that mirrors an internal trip. The fragmented structure reflects an altered perception of reality. Words function more as sounds than meanings. Logic dissolves, and thought drifts freely. Sound effects and instrumentation create weightlessness. There's no solid ground, only constant movement. Each listen reveals something new. Astronomy Domini solidified Pink Floyd as pioneers of psychedelic rock. LSD was the catalyst for that exploration. The Beatles, Tomorrow Never Knows. Tomorrow Never Knows is arguably the most LSD-influenced Beatles song ever recorded. John Lennon wrote it after multiple intense psychedelic experiences. The lyrics were inspired by spiritual texts read while under the influence. The structure completely abandons pop conventions. It loops endlessly, reflecting the circular perception of time during an acid trip. The song doesn't progress, it floats. The production was revolutionary, using tape loops and experimental effects. The studio became a psychedelic instrument. Tomorrow Never Knows wasn't just a song, it was a statement. LSD permanently changed how music could be created. Yes, you and I. You and I represents the spiritual side of progressive psychedelia. Members of Yes used LSD to explore unity and higher consciousness. The song reflects an elevated vision of love and existence. Its long, flowing structure mirrors a mind moving through different emotional states. LSD allowed the band to conceive music as a journey. Complex arrangements serve immersion rather than technical display. Everything feels connected yet free. You and I shows how LSD influenced progressive rock as a tool for spiritual exploration. Grateful Dead, Dark Star. Dark Star is the ultimate psychedelic journey. Grateful Dead regularly composed and performed under the influence of LSD. The song became a launch point for endless improvisation. The lyrics are minimal and abstract. The true message lies in the music. LSD allowed intuitive, real-time communication between band members. Live versions could last over 20 minutes. Time dissolved. Band and audience shared the same trip. Dark Star isn't just a song, it's a mental state. The complete fusion of LSD and rock. These songs didn't just define an era, they permanently changed how music is understood. LSD opened creative doors that many artists never closed again. Some journeys led to light, others to darkness, but all expanded the limits of rock. If you enjoyed this psychedelic trip, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and join us for more stories where music and the mind collide. Because in rock, sometimes the real journey happens inside your head.